All right, welcome everyone. History students, settle in for today's explainer. Today, we're setting the stage to explore what is arguably one of the most devastating, complex, and totally transformative episodes in modern South Asian history, the tragic birth of Bangladesh in 1971. We're going to really dig into how a massive failure of democracy and the suppression of a people's identity unleashed widespread violence, and how that intense struggle ultimately led to national liberation. Here's our quick game plan for today. First, we'll look at the roots of the crisis. Then, we'll cover the pivotal 1970 election, moving into Operation Searchlight, the resulting resistance in refugees, and finally, the birth of a nation.
Okay, let's jump right into part one, the roots of the crisis.
To really get what happened in 1971, we've got to rewind a bit to 1947. You see, Pakistan was created based on the two-nation theory. The idea was to unite these disparate groups, mainly around a shared Islamic identity. But here is the massive flaw in that plan. The theory pretty much entirely ignored the deeply rooted cultural and linguistic differences within the newly drawn borders of Pakistan. The people in the Eastern Wing were intensely attached to their Bengali language and identity, and that created an immediate, powerful tension with the central government.
Just picture this geography for a second. Pakistan was literally a nation physically divided. You had one single country split into two wings, separated by roughly 1,600 kilometers of Indian territory. And here's the crazy power dynamic. East Pakistan actually had the larger population, but West Pakistan held all the cards, the political and military dominance. Over time, you can imagine, many Bengalis in the East felt they were being treated completely unfairly by a distant, arrogant West.
So you've got this compounding frustration over 2 decades. It just keeps building. In 1948, the central government promoted Urdu as the national language, basically ignoring that Bangla was spoken by the majority. This directly sparked the 1952 language movement, which was a huge turning point for Bengali nationalism. Fast forward to 1958, and Pakistan comes under military rule, shutting Bengalis out of power even more. All of this cultural disrespect and political exclusion led the absolute groundwork for 1966, when Bengali leader Sheikh Mujibur Rahman introduced his famous six-point demand. He was calling for sweeping federal autonomy and self-rule for East Pakistan. Which brings us right to part two, the democratic turning point of the 1970 election. The results of this 1970 election are absolutely critical to the whole story. Sheikh Mujibur Rahman's Awami League won a staggering, absolute landslide victory. They took 160 out of the 162 available seats in East Pakistan. I mean, that is massive. It didn't just give them regional power, it gave the Awami League an absolute majority in Pakistan's National Assembly. They had an undeniable, crystal-clear democratic mandate to form the national government. So, what happens when a massive democratic win like that just gets ignored? Why was it rejected? Well, for the West Pakistani political and military elites, that six-point demand looked way too much like a step toward total separation. There was no way they were going to accept a Bengali-led government. Their flat-out refusal to share power created an immediate, explosive constitutional crisis.
Things hit a boiling point on March 1st, 1971. Pakistan's military ruler, President Yahya Khan, postponed the opening of the National Assembly. To the Bengalis, this was it. This was the ultimate rejection of their democratic rights. It immediately triggered mass protests, strikes, and widespread civil disobedience all across East Pakistan. The whole situation was basically a powder keg just waiting for a match.
And that leads us into part three, Operation Searchlight.
What's wild here is that while political negotiations were visibly happening throughout March, the military was secretly prepping a totally brutal crackdown. Late at night on March 25, 1971, the Pakistan Army launched Operation Searchlight. This wasn't a small skirmish. It was a sweeping, violent campaign to crush Bengali separatism. And they didn't just target armed resistance. They went after Awami League leaders, students, intellectuals, the press, and Hindu minorities.
Now, this is a heavy but absolutely crucial part of our lesson today. The violence that followed Operation Searchlight is widely classified by scholars as genocide. This went way beyond a military operation. We're talking about mass killings, the systematic destruction of entire communities, and a horrific campaign of widespread sexual violence against Bengali women and girls. Many of these brave survivors were later honored by Bangladesh as Birangana, which translates to war heroines, though they still faced immense trauma and social stigma long after. The military also specifically targeted Bengali Hindus, viewing them as disloyal or pro-Indian. As historians, we really have to look at the full, messy picture impartially. While the state definitely bore the main responsibility for the mass atrocities and genocide, history is rarely one-sided on the ground. Some Bengali nationalists also carried out unjustified attacks on the Urdu-speaking Bihari minority in East Pakistan, many of whom were seen as supporters of a united Pakistan. These attacks on civilians were serious crimes as well. It's a stark, tragic reminder that conflicts like this almost always contain multiple, complex layers of violence.
Moving into Part 4, Resistance and Refugees.
10 million. Just let that number sink in. Roughly 10 million people fled their homes, pouring across the border into India as refugees to escape the terror. This massive displacement is honestly some of the most undeniable evidence of the sheer scale of the violence. People just do not pack up and leave their homes by the millions unless it is literally a matter of life and death. It created one of the absolute largest refugee crises in modern history. But here's the thing. The military's brutality totally failed to crush the Bengali spirit. Instead, inside the country, the political protests morphed into a full-blown armed liberation war. Bengali soldiers, police, students, and regular activists banded together to form the Mukti Bahini. They became this fierce guerrilla resistance force that fought back against the Pakistan Army all throughout 1971. Eventually, they received absolutely crucial support, training, and sanctuary from neighboring India.
We also have to zoom out for a second and look at the whole Cold War chessboard. The massive influx of refugees was putting incredible pressure on India to intervene. And meanwhile, the global superpowers were playing a highly controversial role. The US and China were backing Pakistan. In fact, scholars often point out that the Nixon administration specifically failed to use its massive leverage over Pakistan to stop the violence against civilians. It's widely seen today as a huge missed opportunity for international intervention.
And that brings us to our final section, the birth of a nation.
Let's just quickly review how unbelievably fast this all went down in 1971. You have the democratic failure on March 1st, which leads straight into the brutal crackdown on March 25th, instantly sparking the Liberation War. By December, this crisis had exploded into a full-scale conventional war between India and Pakistan. The Indian military, teaming up with the Mukti Bahini, moved in and swiftly defeated the Pakistani forces, culminating in their formal surrender in Dhaka on December 16, 1971.
Now, there is an ongoing historical debate here that we should note. There's a variance regarding the exact death toll of the conflict. Bangladesh's official figure stands at 3 million deaths, whereas some international scholars estimate the figures are in the hundreds of thousands. But listen, the crucial takeaway here is this. Regardless of the exact number, the sheer scale of the killing, the suffering, and the displacement was absolutely undeniable and totally catastrophic.
So, on December 16th, East Pakistan officially becomes the independent state of Bangladesh. But man, winning the war was just step one. This newborn nation immediately faced massive hurdles. They had to somehow resettle 10 million returning refugees, physically rebuild a devastated infrastructure, try to address the deep, lingering psychological trauma of millions of survivors, including the Birangonas, and navigate the incredibly complex political landscape of seeking justice for war crimes.
To wrap up today's explainer, I want to leave you with a profound question to chew on. How should societies remember traumatic histories like 1971? The birth of Bangladesh is this intense story of democracy denied, mass violence unleashed, and a truly heroic struggle for liberation. Remembering it properly requires historical accuracy, serious moral reflection, and a real commitment to understanding the immense human cost of freedom. Thank you so much for joining me today. And as always, keep questioning and keep learning.